The first Zelvari warship entered the Sol system without so much as a warning shot. It loomed over Earth's orbital defenses, a monstrous construct of blackened metal and cold efficiency. It did not hail us, did not engage in negotiations. It simply existed there, a testament to the inevitability of our destruction. Then came the message. The High Chancellor of the Zelvari Dominion appeared on every screen, every broadcast, every signal across the system. His reptilian features twisted into something that might have been amusement. "Humans," he said, his voice smooth and condescending. "We have observed your kind for some time. Your technology is primitive. Your fleets are laughable. You are insects. And now the Dominion has come to exterminate you." The words sent a cold ripple through humanity. Some panicked, some prayed. Others, the stubborn and the angry, clenched their fists and swore through their teeth. Then Mars was gone. In a single pulse of white-hot energy, the colony world, our first great step into the stars, was reduced to a burning husk. 3 million souls, wiped from existence in a heartbeat. It wasn't a battle, it wasn't a war, it was an execution. The Zelvari did not expect a response. They assumed fear. They assumed surrender. They assumed wrong. Within hours, Earth's leaders convened. The military scrambled every ship we had. Our fleet was nothing compared to theirs. Rusty old warships, civilian vessels hastily refitted with weapons, carriers that had never seen true combat. And yet, it didn't matter. Humanity had never faced an enemy like this before, but the Zelvari had never faced us before either. Our first move was not an attack, it was an infiltration. The Zelvari thought their technology was untouchable. They thought their AI systems were flawless. They thought their encryption was impenetrable. But human hackers didn't care what was impossible. They only cared about what could be broken. And so, while the Zelvari fleet hovered over Earth, gloating over its inevitable victory, a small team of engineers and cyber warriors boarded a stolen transport and hacked their flagship's navigation system. The moment the invasion was set to begin, the impossible happened. Half the Zelvari fleet jumped away, not to their staging ground, not to a coordinated assault point, but to a randomized set of coordinates in the deepest void of space. Chaos erupted in their ranks. Orders were scrambled, their battle formation collapsed, and that's when we struck. Humanity did not fight like they did. We didn't send ships in neat, organized formations. We fought dirty. We fought like survivors. We lured their warships into asteroid belts, where their massive bulk meant nothing against fields of tumbling rock. We overloaded their systems with false signals and electronic warfare. We hit supply chains, targeting fuel reserves and food stocks, because we understood something the Zelvari never had to consider. You don't win wars by killing soldiers. You win wars by starving them. The battle for Sol became the turning point of the war. They called our warships toys. They called our weapons weak. But by the time the first Zelvari dreadnought shattered in a fiery explosion, they had stopped laughing. And by the time we sent our first invasion fleet into their territory, they had started screaming. The first Zelvari dreadnought to fall wasn't taken down by superior firepower. It wasn't blasted apart by some advanced alien-killing weapon. It was tricked. The UNS Indomitable, an old Earth battleship with armor that belonged in a scrapyard, lured the Zelvari warship into Jupiter's gravity well. Its captain, a stubborn old bastard named Elias Carter, knew exactly what he was doing when he fired up the engines and pretended to retreat. The Zelvari commander, proud, arrogant, pursued without question. And then the Indomitable did something insane, It slammed on the brakes. A full-speed burn in the opposite direction, right as the Zelvari ship committed to its chase. It was too big, too slow to react in time. The Dreadnought, a vessel that had leveled entire planets, was pulled into Jupiter's gravity well. Its engines screamed, shields overloaded, hull plating buckled under the sheer pressure of the planet's pull. The last transmission from the Zelvari crew was pure, raw panic. And then the ship was gone, swallowed by the gas giant. The Battle of Sol had started, and humanity had drawn first blood. From that moment on, everything changed. The Zelvari still had the advantage in numbers and firepower, but they had lost something far more important. They lost their certainty. Their soldiers, once proud, disciplined warriors, began making mistakes. Their formations were sloppier, their communications filled with hesitation. They had come expecting fear. They found rage, and rage is a hell of a motivator. Every fleet we had, every last rusty, outdated warship was thrown into the fight. We hijacked their vessels mid-battle, hacking into their systems and overriding their controls. We sabotaged their supply lines, forcing them to ration fuel and weapons for the first time in their empire's history. We hunted their command ships, forcing their admirals to hide like cowards. They still outgunned us, but they stopped fighting like conquerors. They started fighting like prey. And when the first of their fleets retreated, that was the moment we knew we could win. After the first engagement, we knew the Zelvari would regroup. They were arrogant, but they weren't stupid. They would come back with a full fleet. No tricks, no mercy. So we laid a trap. We knew they would target Titan, Saturn's largest moon, home to one of our biggest fuel refineries and a critical supply hub. It was a perfect target, and they would expect it to be lightly defended, an easy victory to reassert their dominance. That's why we let them think it was. When their fleet arrived in orbit, it was the same as before. Dozens of warships, moving with methodical precision. Their admiral, some overconfident Zelvari warlord, broadcasted his threats. "Surrender Titan, and we will grant you a swift death. Resist, and we will burn this moon to its core." Humanity's response? A single message: come and take it. They charged. What they didn't realize was that Titan's refineries weren't just making fuel, they were making weapons. The moment they entered orbit, we triggered the ignition. Titan's atmosphere was rich in methane and hydrocarbons, gases that, when ignited properly, could turn the entire moon into a burning hellscape. We had seeded the upper atmosphere with fuel vapor and set traps, controlled charges, ready to turn space itself into fire. And when the first Zelvari warship got too close, we lit the match. A chain reaction tore through their fleet. The vacuum of space should have stopped the fire from spreading, but it didn't, because we had calculated the blast pattern down to the molecule. Their ships weren't just burning. They were being cooked from the inside, their shields struggling against a storm of white-hot plasma. The Zelvari panicked. They had never seen anything like it. Their capital ships tried to escape. That's when the real ambush began. While they were busy dodging the firestorm, our fleet, those same toy warships they had mocked, struck from behind. We weren't using traditional weapons. We had learned by now that our railguns and missiles couldn't match their shields, so we used something better. We used physics. Small, fast-moving kinetic impactors, chunks of metal fired at near-light speed, pierced their hulls like paper. Our ships weaved in and out of their formations, jamming their sensors, cutting off communications, isolating them one by one. By the time the fire died out, The Zelvari fleet was in ruins. 27 Zelvari warships destroyed, 10 more disabled and captured. And humanity? We lost 3 ships. The Zelvari High Command was silent for days. It was the first time in recorded history that one of their fleets had been annihilated. And for the first time since the war began, we saw something in their transmissions that hadn't been there before. Fear. But we weren't done yet. Because we weren't just going to survive. We were going to win. The Zelvari Dominion had never known true fear. For centuries, their empire had expanded without resistance, crushing civilizations and absorbing their technology. They were the galaxy's apex predators, and to them, humanity had been nothing more than a nuisance, until Titan. After the battle, their silence was deafening. Their leadership was in shock. They had lost an entire fleet, not to an overwhelming force, but to ingenuity. Their war doctrine had never accounted for an enemy that fought like us. And now, we had momentum. Humanity didn't waste time celebrating. Titan had been a victory, but we knew the Zelvari would return. They would adapt. They would bring everything they had. So we made a decision. We weren't going to wait for them to attack again. Instead, we were going to take the war to them. Our intelligence had pieced together something crucial. The Zelvari supply lines were vulnerable. Their empire was vast, but it relied on centralized hubs, massive supply stations that funneled resources to their front lines. Unlike humanity, which had learned to fight with scarcity, the Zelvari had built an empire of excess. Without those supply hubs, their fleets would starve. And the nearest one? The Zurach Depot. A massive space station orbiting a barren moon, deep in Zelvari-controlled space. It was their primary logistical hub for this entire sector. Fuel, weapons, reinforcements, everything funneled through it. If we could destroy it, we wouldn't just cripple their war effort. We would send a message. The destruction of the Zurach Depot shattered the Zelvari's war effort in our sector. Their fleets were starving, their supply lines severed, and their commanders in chaos. But desperation is a dangerous thing. In response to their losses, the Zelvari High Command did something they had never done before. They sent their imperial warlord, Supreme Commander Jokrin, to take control of the war personally. Jokrin was no arrogant noble. He was no desk strategist. He was a butcher, a conqueror, the man who had burned entire civilizations to the ground without a second thought. And now, his sole mission was to exterminate humanity. We knew what this meant. They weren't coming to defeat us. They were coming to end us. The Zelvari had lost their battles, but they still had overwhelming numbers. Their empire stretched across the stars, and when they finally regrouped, they sent a true war fleet. Hundreds of capital ships, carriers, dreadnoughts. It was the largest invasion force ever assembled, and it was heading straight for Earth. We had no illusions. This was it. If they broke through, humanity would die screaming. We had one chance, one last desperate stand to end the war before it ended us. Every ship we had left, every pilot, every soldier, every last bullet and missile, everything was thrown into Earth's final defense. We fortified Luna with planetary cannons and orbital minefields. We deployed drones, automated defenses, cloaked strike teams hidden in the asteroid belt. We turned the entire Sol system into a death trap. And still, it might not have been enough. When the Zelvari fleet arrived, it was like a wall of darkness blotting out the stars. Their dreadnoughts advanced, their superweapons charging. And then, we fired first. The battle wasn't a skirmish. It wasn't even a war. It was annihilation. The first wave of Zelvari ships were torn apart by our orbital defenses, but there were too many of them. Their warships punched through, their cannons scorching our fleets. One by one, our ships fell. Luna's defenses held for 3 hours. Then the Zelvari unleashed their planetary bombardment weapons. A section of the moon collapsed, torn apart by plasma, and the Zelvari kept coming. They had breached the final perimeter. Earth was within range. We had one move left, a single last-ditch effort, the riskiest, most desperate plan humanity had ever attempted. We called it the Ragnarok Protocol. Using the last of our stolen Zelvari codes, we managed to infiltrate their fleet's central command network. It wasn't enough to disable them. They had adapted since Titan, but it was enough to force all of their ships into a single, centralized location. And that's exactly where we wanted them. Because deep in the asteroid belt, we had been building something. A hidden facility, a prototype weapon. Not a superlaser, not a bomb, a gravity weapon, the Singularity Lance, a device designed to create an artificial black hole, contained and directed for one purpose. And now, as the Zelvari fleet massed for their final attack on Earth, we fired it. A pinpoint shot, a micro-singularity aimed directly into the heart of their flagship. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the void ripped open. The black hole was small, controlled, but not gentle. The Zelvari flagship, their command core, was the first to go. Then their dreadnoughts. Then their cruisers. A chain reaction of destruction swept through their entire fleet. Ships collapsed inward, crushed by gravitational forces beyond comprehension. Their own mass pulled them apart. And within moments, the greatest armada the galaxy had ever seen was nothing more than debris. Silence. Then, cheering. Humanity had done the impossible. We had not only survived, we had won. With their war fleet obliterated, the Zelvari Dominion collapsed overnight. Their conquered worlds rebelled. Their vassals turned against them. Their high command, their nobles, their warlords, all fell. And humanity? We rose. We took their technology, their colonies, their place among the stars. The species they had oppressed for centuries rallied behind us. And when the last remnants of the Zelvari surrendered, when their final ruler kneeled before humanity and begged for mercy, we gave them the same answer they had once given us. You are insects, and we do not trade with insects. They had called our warships toys. They had called our species weak. Now they would call us something else, their rulers.